challenges that we face mainly are perception. There are people who don't believe we can do it. They've been around since it was announced that we would host back in 2013. Some of these negative views are stereotypical, based on past experience, maybe in the 80s and 90s where things were very different. Some is based on prejudice, but for us, we're moving ahead to prove these people wrong. Importantly, though, we've got to demonstrate our capacity, and all the way through from now until when we host the APEC year, we've got to manage people's expectations and demonstrate that we are on track. The games were very good. Those of you who were in Port Moresby for the games will know that everything came together. It was on time and it was on budget. So it's a big act to follow, but for APEC, we are building our team in much the same way that the Games built their team, and in fact, where our model is very similar to very successful APEC host models from Australia in 2007, Peru in 2008, the United States, and way back to Chile, who had first used this model, where it's very much a private sector-focused model. Now, the APEC we host through 2013 is not going to be gold-plated. I'm not sure how many people in this room went to China last year, but it was outstanding. Their APEC was it was more than gold-plated. For goodness sake, there were goldfish in the floor of the dining room. They went to all limits, and the fireworks went for half an hour, I think. But the Prime Minister is very clear. We want this to be a Pacific-style APEC. It will be informal where that's appropriate, informal in appearance, but the environment will be conducive to delivering a very strong agenda. Now, our costs will be less than China, for example. We are still going through the budget. We've got a figure in mind, and we're now double-checking that before we go to the budget goes to Parliament in October. But it will be not the billions and billions that I hear on social media and around the traps. It will be a very manageable budget that is very focused and will involve the private sector to a great extent. There won't be the wild costs. It'll be within limits. And particularly in the current environment, that's what we expect. Now, we've got 4 planning phases, 4 phases in our preparations. We've just come through the scoping phase of the authority. The authority was approved by Parliament at the end of last year, then we formed a few months later. Now we're into the first of 3 planning phases, but the thing with our planning phases is that we have concurrent execution and that we have events ongoing the whole time through. Where the Games and us are different is that the Games prepared for a good 3 years and then their event went for 2 weeks. So they didn't get any dry runs. Their dry run was the real event on day 1. So we have that opportunity to get our systems working well. We're expanding at the same sort of rate as the Australian APEC and the Australian G20 staff. We now have only 8 people on our staff, but by the end of the year there'll be 26. Then as we get to the end of the next phase, it'll be 46 by the end of next year, November next year, 160 by November 2017, and by the time we get to the APEC summit, we'll be 200 plus with many more support staff, military, police, and so on. Our staff, there will be, I expect, only a couple of expat staff. We really want this to be Papua New Guinea staff, officials leading the way. We hope that we will bring a lot of Papua New Guineans home who've gone off to Australia, who've gone off to the United Kingdom or the US, to bring their experience back. And we also have a very capable Games staff, the people who deliver the Games, mostly Papua New Guineans, and they will transition across to work with us. And in the meantime, too, we also have other events. We have the Pacific Islands Forum next week, or 2 weeks from now, FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup next year. So we have these ongoing events that will provide our staff a chance to go across and work in other areas, and we'll bring more staff in who work on these big events. So we've got 4 phases to plan through that conclude with the APEC year. Now, APEC is not just the summit. People talk about the APEC meeting, but it's around 200 meetings in the APEC year. Some of them are in clusters of, say, 35 and 40 meetings. Some are ministerial meetings that are 1 and 2 meetings together, but it's more than the one meeting at the end of the year. And in the meantime, as we move towards 2018, we have a series of high-level meetings that will take place. That starts in October this year with the first ever ministerial meeting to be held in Papua New Guinea, the first ever APEC ministerial meeting. That's the ministers responsible for forestry. So that's really our launch date when we get our first big one off the ground. There'll be ministers from APEC's 21 member economies, over a 3-day meeting period. Next year we have another 4 major meetings, and in 2017 we also have another 4 meetings and maybe more. So that's where you'll see APEC ramping up for those who are in Papua New Guinea. Now, the bottom line for APEC in planning it is that it is a logistics enterprise. Essentially, every year that it hosts APEC, every economy or country that hosts APEC, it's many of the same things. There are a couple of thousand line items that we have to deliver across security, across logistics, hotels. There is a big list, but we know what they are because we deliver them every year. My previous years working with the Indonesian government or the Peruvian government or the APEC Secretariat in Singapore, that's what we go through every year. But every year too, it is localized so that it's relevant to the economy where it's being held. And we'll go through the precinct soon, how we're going to break it down in Papua New Guinea. But for us, working through these line items, we know pretty much how much it's going to cost, when we need to deliver, when we need to bring individual staff on. It's all been mapped out already so that we can start moving through the further preparation and execution phases in the following 3 years. It would be good to give you an idea of how we're planning the major event, the major APEC Leaders Week in Port Moresby, to give you some perspective on how we're going to lay that out. So I didn't want to bore you with too many PowerPoint slides today, no death by PowerPoint, but there's one slide that I'd like to show you, and that is of the precincts and how we've designed them. There are 6 APEC precincts that we are planning to develop for APEC Leaders Week. You can see 5 of them on this slide. The further one is off the slide. Starting with where we will host leaders. Now, that's the AELM precinct, the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting precinct. People have been talking about Port Moresby being locked down for weeks on end and no one being able to move in such a tight security operation. Well, that's not the case. This area down here, the APEC precinct, is around the Parga Hill Ring Road, Ella Beach area. Now, that's an area that we've not used until now. The road is almost ready. It will be locked down for a period of planning leading up to the Leaders Week, and that's the place where leaders will meet. We will be building what's called an APEC house there. It's a roundhouse design, very similar to what we used in 2005 in Korea. And that's where all the meetings will take place, where leaders meet as a group. All the parking will be there for the motorcades. We'll have tactical response. That's where the viewing rooms and that sort of thing will be. So when people talk about locking down Port Moresby, that's not the case. That's the area there that will be a no-go area. Next to it, we have the town precinct, where the majority of the hotels are. And that's also where we'll have half the hotels really. And that's where we'll have the cruise ships moored as well. I'll go into detail on that in a minute, but we will need cruise ship capacity to offset the accommodation demands. This area won't be locked down. This will be tightly patrolled. It's a high security area, but there are people working and living in that area, so we can't do that. Moving further, this is the APEC CEO Summit precinct, and I'm sure that's one that's of great interest to most people in this room. If you don't know what the CEO Summit is, that's where we have senior CEOs coming from around the region, the heads of major companies in the United States, in Asia and Europe, and there's an ongoing dialogue. There's a series of panels. The leaders of at least 10, 11 or 12 economies will come and address the CEO Summit. We plan at this point, unless things change, to host that in the Tarama Aquatic and Leisure Centre. It's an enormous building now, that if anyone's seen it, and it's certainly going to work for that purpose. We have the Waigani precinct, and that's where a lot of the work will be done that doesn't involve leaders. That'll involve meetings with senior officials. It will have the meeting of ministers responsible for trade and foreign affairs. And we've got a number of venues there already that we'll use. The new convention centre that has been built in Waigani, that's almost ready. We have hotels there. We'll have the International Media Centre. We'll have the Media Hotel, which will be the Raintree Hotel. But that won't take all media. Some media will go to the Games Village, but those who want to pay the higher price will go to the hotel. And that's also where the Hilton will be. The Hilton, if you're not aware, is being built just over here in Hohola. Ground has well and truly been broken. In fact, rock they had to cut through to lay the footings. That's where we will also host the gala dinner. So that's the big ticket event, the event that's really seen around the world with the spouses, in a big convention centre, a new longhouse that's being built there. The airport precinct, pretty obvious, really. I mean, that's where we obviously will try and park as many aircraft as we can, and I'll talk about that in a moment, and receive leaders. And then we also have the two flora and fauna precincts at the Adventure Park at 14 Mile and also at the Nature Park. Port Moresby is actually not a bad place to host APEC in terms of what we need for that core, infrastructure. Some other years, Peru, for example, we had a really good place to host the leaders that was very secure, but motorcades had to drive all through the city, and that's a bit of a security nightmare. We'll go through these individually. The hotels, there's no doubt that we don't have enough rooms to host what could be 10,000 delegates in Port Moresby for that week. Now, we don't have 10,000 there the whole time. Some come at different times, but we are short. The way we're dealing with that is the CEO Summit will be not 1,500 delegates like it was last year in China. We want something more intimate. The Prime Minister is clear that for the CEO Summit, we want senior CEOs, serious businesses. So we'll reduce the numbers there. We will need cruise ships to take on some accommodation capacity, and that's pretty much commonplace these days. We were at the SIDS meeting, the UN SIDS meeting in Samoa recently, and they did that. We are talking with the cruise ship companies now. That we've now also set the date for the APEC leaders meeting, which is 17-18 November. We needed to confirm that before we really got into detail with the cruise ships. So we'll be ready for them. Now, we've got the Games Village as Games infrastructure we'll use. That will be just for journalists, as I mentioned before, who don't want to pay the higher rate at a full hotel, and there's a lot of media that will come from around the region who will use the Games Village. There are additional hotels planned. I don't want to put them into our planning until we see some ground being broken and we see some steel and concrete going up. But when it comes to leaders' accommodation, we have sufficient accommodation for leaders of the standard that they require. Some hotels will have more than one leader, but we'll arrange that according to security clusters. So countries that work together at a security level, their leaders will be able to stay in the same place. Transportation, I'll show you the APEC primary road. Now, there's the route that, again, has had some discussion that people think that the roads will be shut down. We have one primary route that will take leaders to and from venues. It starts here at Airways, goes through the airport, over the new flyover, which, if you haven't seen that, it's changed the road network in Port Moresby significantly, through the Waigani precinct, Hohola, and all the way around through the lockdown area to Ella Beach. It's a wide open road from a security perspective. It's very good. There are no sharp turns. It can be easily managed and protected for our security people. Now, the airport is always a concern for any APEC Leaders Week. There will be changes. The current terminal has just been expanded. You would have seen that. But we will have a new airport terminal by 2018 that will go where the old terminal used to be, the one that we closed in 1998. So that'll be just like the Brisbane airport, for example, split level for arrivals and departures for people to drop off. Parking aircraft, we expect dozens of aircraft will be arriving. That includes, of course, Air Force One, for example, the chase plane for the United States, the secondary plane for the United States President. We can't park them all here. For the bigger aircraft, we have enough spaces to park, say, the United States and China and Russia. But for those who cannot park, we can move them on to other aircraft, and that will all be planned. We've got NADSAB, we've got Australian airports, Cairns and Townsville, Amberley and Tyndall. So that's not going to be an issue. I know people are worried about that. In fact, in APEC Australia in 2007, there were only 2 aircraft that stayed in Sydney, and that was the United States and Russia. So we've got that in hand, and we're working to make sure that's a nice, smooth process. Security is always the big challenge for any APEC meeting. You've got 21 leaders from some of the world's largest economies in the one place, meeting together, traveling around the city in road movements. We are well and truly on the way with our security planning. That includes strengthening the PNGDF, strengthening police. We are working with our security partners, particularly Australia. Australia is providing tremendous assistance, and we've got the ongoing defence cooperation, but there are specific things that will help us plan for APEC, and Australia is very good there, and we had more meetings in Canberra last week. So looking at security, we will be ready. We've got 3 years, which is not a lot of time, but considering that we've been already underway with the preparations and Australia's been preparing, we will be on time for that. And that's, aside from the delivering an agenda that matters for the region and stimulates jobs and business and growth, ensuring that delegates go home safe and leaders go home safe is the priority. Now, the other question that people ask is, well, what's in it for PNG and what's in it for business? Well, what's in it for Papua New Guinea is knowledge and technical capacity. APEC is has a very broad agenda. It's not just about trade, not just about trade at the border. It's about trade, it's behind the border trade. It's about intellectual property. It's about building supply chains. It's about disaster preparedness, about standards for chemicals, about tourism, mining. It's about fisheries. And in each of these areas, there's ongoing dialogue to strengthen industry capacity. And particularly over the last 10 years, there's been an increased focus on helping developing economies to try to come up to speed in each of these areas. So Papua New Guinea has access to this wealth of technology and knowledge that can be applied in our industry and sectors at home. A good example is post-harvest technology. There was a big research project recently in Vietnam that's looked at how to retain more of your post-harvest, to increase that by 5%, which is a lot for some farmers. And we've got access to what they came up through that research, and we can have more projects that we will bring to Papua New Guinea. Tourism and business promotion. This is an outstanding opportunity to promote Papua New Guinea on the world stage. Never before have we seen 21 or 20 leaders come to Papua New Guinea, including the presidents of the United States, Russia, China, the Prime Minister of Japan, the President of Russia, President of Korea. If we present it properly, it will be an outstanding opportunity to promote tourism, culture, and business in Papua New Guinea. And the PM's view on this is that we've got to promote both sides. We promote culture and tourism, and particularly as we see the tourism sector continue to increase. But we've got to promote an image of Papua New Guinea as a place for business. We've got to promote Papua New Guinea as a hub for transportation, a place for investment, a strong economy. So that's what's in it for Papua New Guinea. And the other side of it, then the visuals we'll see for Leaders Week will be spectacular, particularly when we see those cruise ships in the harbour. We see the backdrop of the city. It will be a very, very strong image boost, particularly when the media of all the APEC economies will be following what their president or prime minister is doing, and we get coverage in Europe as well. Well, what's in it for business? That's always the big question, and I think many people in this room are asking that very question. Aside from what will happen on the trade side and increasing trade and investment, the direct benefits for business in Papua New Guinea is that of what we spend on preparing for and hosting APEC, most will go to the private sector, because the government is not in the business of delivering the items that we need. And that includes transportation and freight, venues, the catering, uniforms, communications, everything from gifts and handicrafts, and security as well. These are things that will be outsourced. So when we come up with it, when we deliver our budget and our projections to Parliament in October, November, a lot of that figure will be going direct to business, and that will have the flow-on effect as well as it trickles down to providers to business. There will be sponsorship opportunities. It's different to the Games, and the Games sponsors came on who have a market, in a mass market, because the Games, of course, has tens of thousands of spectators in Papua New Guinea and around the world. Now, they're different sponsors for us. It's more of a business sponsorship, and it wouldn't be a sponsorship to the same level, but there will be business sponsorship opportunities. I don't want to disappoint by saying that it won't be the multi-billion kina APEC that I think some people are expecting, but we have to be responsible, but there will be opportunities for business as we move forward. We've got 3 years. It's not long, but we're on track, and we're now moving to the next phase, and I hope you look out for the real start of our APEC hosting, which will be, as I mentioned earlier, the APEC meeting of ministers responsible for forestry in October.